Uh, Good afternoon, or for some, good evening. Perhaps that's Louisa and others. I'm Lance J. Brown, co-founder of the CSU. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, the next in our long-standing series of discussions with thought leaders around the world on our progress towards greater, greener cities for all. Our guest today, Dr. Setha Low, is speaking to us from New York about her new book, Why Public Space Matters. It's my pleasure to introduce her and to moderate. For those attending who've requested AIA continuing ed credits, you'll get one HSW credit, but you must stay for 45 minutes and use the self-reporting option. For those joining us for the first time, the organizer of this series, the CSU, is devoted to building bridges between the United Nations and civil society, the design professions, business, academia, and allied organizations. The mission ranges from increasing awareness about emerging issues, facilitating knowledge transfer between and among policy and decision makers, and fostering connections, cooperation, and collaboration, while all the time promoting the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 11. In the spirit of collaboration, we want to make sure we thank all of today's program partners. All are listed in the invitation, and we thank them for their support. I also want to give a shout out to Chicha Mabidela, CSU Senior Fellow and Green Cities Coordinator, for her help with the series. I want to invite everyone to visit our website, see our resources, see our publications, and join us for our upcoming events, including our October 11th event about the 2023 UIA conference in Copenhagen with Anna Rubo and Adam Lubinsky, both in person and online at Columbia University, followed by Clara Simay speaking about urban agriculture in Paris with Rick Bell on October 25th. And check back in December when we'll be coming to you live from Kibera in Nairobi, Kenya. Today's series guest has an appropriately long title. Dr. Setha Low is a distinguished professor of environmental psychology, geography, anthropology, and women's studies, and the director of the Public Space Research Group at the Graduate Center at City University of New York. I've known Setha for a long time. We've shared the podium locally and internationally, and we both pursued careers under the umbrella of the great public university, the City University of New York. I love what Setha does. I love her commitment, her passion, and her working across silos. And she's a great dancer. Setha received her PhD in cultural anthropology from the University of California, Berkeley. She began her career as an assistant professor, associate professor of landscape architecture and regional planning and anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania, eventually arriving at New York City University. She's widely published with more than 100 articles and chapters and lectures internationally. Her books, among many, include Spatializing Culture, The Ethnography of Space and Place, Rethinking Urban Parks, Public Space and Cultural Diversity, and Behind the Gates, Life, Security, and the Pursuit of Happiness in Fortress America. As noted in the invitation to today's discussion, Setha's book is a powerful defining statement and a foundational contributor to healthy civic life. It not only details what we are at risk of losing, but shows us how can we not only stop losses, but work to expand the number of spaces available to the public. And if we're so fortunate, she may comment on how design is central to the creation of public space. On a more personal note, I have focused on the value, purpose, function, and design of public space myself. I share rather profoundly Setha's passion for the subject. I've lectured on it at the Building Museum in Texas. I share a seat at the table with Setha at Bologna's Public Space Institute with Luisa Bravo. I instituted the program that produced the wonderful Beyond Zuccotti Park publication in the post-Zuccotti Park protests. And we have various publications of the CSU that have devoted full sessions at the United Nations to the topic. In my chapter in Zuccotti Park, I referred to the seminal work of Camille Cité in his 1889 publication, City Planning according to artistic principles, and include in the expanding emergent pantheon of public space champions, Gordon Collins, S.E. Rasmussen, Kevin Lynch, Jan Gehl, William White, Harrison Frager, and so many others. The taxonomy of public spaces is rich and broad, big and small, grand and pocket, parks and plazas, streets and alleys, hard and soft, with today's POPs, privately owned public spaces, often ambiguous. And Carr, Francis, Rivlin, and Stone unpack this taxonomy in their book, Public Space. And I won't go into all the designers to thank. So I'm so thankful for Setha's contribution to this essential realm. I'm excited about what she'll teach us today. I know that there'll be questions for Setha. Please use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them all. Setha, the screen is yours.
Thank you. All right, well, this is the last you'll see me because I'm going to use a PowerPoint. So I just wanted to say hello, everyone. I'm so excited to see so many friends and colleagues here. And I would love it if you could ask questions even during the talk, but I don't know if that's even enabled. But thank you, Lance, for the beautiful introduction. And it's true, Lance and I have been crusading for a long time with so many of you who are in the audience. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you understand that I couldn't be doing this without you, this collectivity of wonderful people that we're trying to really make a difference in this world. Yeah. Yes. Sharing my screen. I still see us, Lance, is that correct? Do you all see? No, there's something wrong. Just a moment. Do you see me, or do you, I need to somehow close this window, I think. No, I'll leave. Lance, what do you see?
I really assume when you share the screen that you have total control. I don't know why we're there.
Yeah,
so
I am sharing the screen and I don't know why we're here. So
yeah,
okay,
hit that minimize button
so
there and it'll drop away.
No, it doesn't. All right, that's exactly
no,
what I
you have to hit
Let me
the
try.
other button, the yellow one.
Okay,
yeah.
There, fantastic.
Good.
Thank you so much. Sorry, everyone, a little technology problem. So welcome, and I am going to talk about why public space matters. The reason I wrote the book was that I really felt that I wanted to say something, and when I use I mean collectively, about what social scientists have to give to you who are designing the world that we live in now. And that after 35 years of research with the Public Space Research Group, there were some things I think we found out that could help designers. And I think that what I'm really hoping today is that we work together. Lance has really asked me to talk about what this has to do with design, but I think what it has to do with design is co-constructed, Lance. I believe that we, and that means all of you in this audience, and I together take this knowledge that it's been produced from ethnographies and begin to think about what it does to change the environments we live in. And there are 4 or 5 maybe takeaways from the book. One, I'm going to present a model of how public space functions as a mediator of positive outcomes. 2, I'm going to offer a multidimensional definition of public space. I will very briefly talk about the ethnographic evidence that shows how public space contributes to individual, societal, and environmental flourishing. I'm hoping we get to a social justice framework that we can use, both as researchers and designers, to evaluate existing public spaces, and a toolkit that we could use to try to make them better. So why does it matter? I don't need to tell you. Public space provides an opportunity for social interaction, especially among people who wouldn't normally encounter one another. And what I think for designers is the most important thing I've tried to do is focus on the mediating values, those things that need to happen in public space to produce the public space outcomes you see. All parks, all public spaces have antecedents, different histories, demographies, different government policies, geographies. And I'm talking about that we have evidence of all these incredible positive outcomes, of which these are just some. But how does it happen? That's really seems to be the important point that I'm trying to make, which is that there are mediating variables that we can plan and design for. One is something we know a lot about, contact. Second, public culture, which I think we know a little less about. And third, affective atmosphere. And one might include in there social media as part of atmosphere. So I'm going to look at each of these. So contact. There is now a 60-year, really, it's a really long history of research that explores the contact hypothesis, which argues that interactions between members of different groups reduce prejudice and improve social harmony. My husband brings me new articles from the American psychologist almost weekly that still argues that direct contact, indirect contact, and even simulated contacts contribute to positive outcomes between people, including deprovincialization, a wider worldview, problem solving, flexible thinking, and creativity. Contact is a liberalizing agent that shapes human cognition and experience. And I think we have to think very seriously, because contact is good for a lot more than was commonly recognized. And it's a basic part of human psychology. So a lot of researchers that we've been talking about, that Lance really laid out, have talked about contact. There's nothing new about saying contact makes a difference. The question really is, under what circumstances, under what, for you, design circumstances, and for me, I would argue social circumstances, does contact occur in a positive way? And I have framed this idea, calling it public culture, trying to get us to understand that the processes of negotiation, the beliefs, values, attitudes, social practices that occur in a public space create a temporary but seemingly somewhat stable culture of how people get along. Conflict and contestation, as well as collaboration and cooperation, create this culture. But this public culture, the way that we learn to be together in public space, mediates the relationship of public space and the public sphere. And the public, because through public space, ideas circulate, interconnect, communicate with one another, and we begin to get this really rich mix, which is why contact works. But it needs this public culture frame, and I believe, we can talk about that public culture can be promoted through design. And there's one more ingredient, and that is affective atmosphere, which was something I hadn't written about that much originally. I think the best example is thinking about the Yankees in New York playing a game, and they win. And everyone goes into the parking lot, and what do? They high five, they talk to one another, they interact in a positive way and begin to create a new kind of sociality. But when they lose, when the Yankees lose, that same atmosphere doesn't exist. I give examples here like Woodstock versus VE Day, or negative things, the shooting of Martin Luther King. Those events create atmospheres, but a park atmosphere of mutual affinity for a place can create what we call indifference to difference. In other words, it encourages an openness to others. So again, where does this affect come from? It's contributing, we know, or we would argue there's evidence to conviviality and social interaction, but it still needs a supportive and egalitarian public culture, and it needs a place for it to happen. Certainly, affective atmosphere can be designed and can be part of this package of these three mediators that make public space able to produce the positive outcomes, produce the flourishing that I want to talk about. Okay, sorry. Let me see if I can make it go back. No. There. For those of you who are researchers, and for those of you who are interested in looking at public spaces comparatively, the book also offers, I feel, a clear definition of what is public space. I believe that we make a mistake as designers and planners and as social scientists, thinking about public space as all one thing. I don't think it is. And I think that in order to begin to ask better questions and develop, let's say, better design topologies in whatever kind of community, that we need to begin to think about what I call a multidimensional definition. And as you can see, this is very, this is not so clear, but like parks go from very large to very small. They are in different locations. They have different numbers of amenities. They're owned differently. They are governed differently. They are controlled with different kinds of rules and regulations. They have different kinds of access. They have different symbolic and historic meanings, and they allow different kinds of political activities. So what I'm imagining with these sliding scales here is that you'd look at a park like Central Park that is large and it's run by a conservancy, even though it's public. It uses policing and surveillance, has lots of symbolic and historical meaning, might be quite different from a local placita that's very small, in which the neighborhood really governs it, in which there's lots of political activity, which let's say is not allowed in Central Park, et cetera, et cetera. And that comparing them or imagining them all as the same, I think we would do a better job of what we do by thinking about them in terms of these different dimensions and then comparing like with like. All right, so why does this all matter? Why have a model? Why do better job of defining public space? Why care about the contact public culture and atmosphere? And as I said, maybe social media. I'm not a social media researcher. I'm waiting for the next generation to also weigh in, because it certainly influences that atmosphere and what's going on there. I took a look in this book only at 6 different aspects of flourishing. Flourishing is a positive psychology concept that says that we can, in fact, enhance the positivity of our lives in ways that enhance both individually, I would argue, communally, neighborhood, and even at the urban level. It is usually used at the individual level. I understand that. But I don't see why we couldn't use that same concept of wanting to have flourishing for whole neighborhoods or whole cities. And public space offers many of the components that make up flourishing, including social justice, health and well-being, play, recreation, a vibrant informal economy and development of social capital. It has an incredible impact on environmental and ecological sustainability and on cultural identity and place attachment. Now, these are just a few of the studies that we've undertaken in ethnographies. In terms of our time, I'm really not going to be able to go over this in any great depth, but it gives you a flavor of where the research comes from. And what I'm hoping that you'll do is interact with me about then what the design elements are that are also enhancing it. I'm here as an anthropologist doing ethnography, trying to listen to people tell me why places matter so much. And I'm offering this model and these frameworks to guide us. But the real design details, I mean, is it that a beach it creates a certain kinds of sense democracy? Or is it things that go on at Jones Beach that are different from other beaches that create it? Because here at Jones Beach, a man will say, in terms of social justice and belonging, this is America, said a man from the Bronx. At Jones Beach, there's a friendly crowd. People are out with family and friends. It's a diverse place. I feel welcome here. Another man says, the first time I visited this park with my wife, I finally felt like I belonged to this country. We played in the ocean with hundreds of folks. Somehow this made me feel special. And these are feelings that public space can provoke, not just at the beach, but Jones Beach, I believe, is iconic of these kinds of feelings. There's also the whole idea of the recognition of difference, the idea that everyone should have a chance to access this beach. There are a lot of families, everyone gets along. That's what New Yorkers are, tolerant. And a group of young Southeast Asian men from Valley Stream said, there are more brown people playing ball and hanging out and getting more animated. People do not look at you just because of your color. And there's a community of care. People there at Jones Beach are involved in picking up trash, improving the boardwalk, restoring the facilities. These are all components of how this particular iconic space and other public spaces can produce a sense of belonging, democracy, social justice, and things. Now, we're all heavily invested and interested in health and well-being and resilience. And I think I don't need to say much about the fact that public space has made a major contribution to improvements in health all over the world. The example from the book is from Walkway over Hudson, which is a mile, 28 mile and a quarter long, where people run across and talk about how much they love to look at the boats. They love being outside, offers them a backup plan for not going to the gym, a place you can easily be outside that is beautiful and enhancing and maximizes and encourages people to be outside. But it also has this a therapeutic benefit. And we all know that during COVID, but it isn't just during COVID, that we need mentally therapeutic places. And this bridge people talk about is a sanctuary. People love to look at the water. We need to think more about the power of blue space. It is also a safe space for a space to for a public space to offer health, well-being, and resilience. It needs to be a place that you can have a peaceful experience. And in this case, people are talking about how everyone has dogs, and people feel very secure because there are people jogging and running, and you can even talk to the dogs and pet the dogs. And also, there's a whole issue of resilience. What do I mean by resilience? I mean, in this particular case, for those of you who know a little bit about Poughkeepsie, it's a city that was really down on its luck. It has a very, very high violent crime rate. It has very high unemployment. It has serious deindustrialization with lacks of jobs. And Poughkeepsie sort of felt like they had lost it behind the times. But working together to create this public space, this walkway over the Hudson, really created brought the community together and made the people feel like they were more resilient. And public spaces do have that positive, healthy, but also aspect of resiliency when you co-produce and co-design spaces with the community together. Play, recreation, and creativity. I'm going to just zoom through this. This is all about Lake Welch, where it's Spanish language and familiar cultural practices give people a really strong sense of community. People from the Bronx come here. It's a great place that children are exposed to nature and playing. And I write a lot about the importance of public space for developing our creativity, something we're all very interested in, and something, again, that design, I think, can contribute tremendously. What we need to remember, however, is for young children, one of the most important parts of play is that it be non-specific and open-ended. And for middle-class people, these public spaces, getting the stress off or relaxing with others, like she says, we like the beach, the water, we lived in a closed room, here we go, we get out to go together. We need to remember the impact on people's ability to problem solve and create by getting outside of where they live, especially people, and which there are many in New York City, in which everyone is living very inside and they can't be outside. Public spaces also offer collective memory and also memories of other countries now replaced in the United States. One thing I think we don't think about as often, and that I always just want to take a moment and say, is that public spaces are sites of the informal economy. In the Global South, 60% of workers are in the informal economy, and they need flexible workspaces. And their ability to live and support their family depends on this access, whether it be sidewalk cafes in Myanmar, Burma, whether it's Long Island and places for public spaces for immigrant workers who will be allowed to stand and be able to get day labor. It's really the informal sector in New York, as I might add, is the first place where immigrants, and we're all facing that right now, at least in New York, public spaces and in the informal economy is where they first integrate into the more formal workforce. Ecological sustainability, what more can I say? There is nothing more important than public space, especially blue and green spaces, for transforming our urban environment into a more sustainable one, be it urban gardens, be it sustainable parks. Here's a park in Paris, co-constructed, co-designed with the neighborhood, whether it be ecological planning. This is Design with Nature here with Ian McHarg. We had important ecological planning for our whole professional discipline in the 60s and 70s. It seems to have gotten forgotten, and now it's back, that we would be designing with nature and that our plans would make a difference in terms of the sustainability of a place, of a very fragile ecology like Sanibel Island. Again, I would like to see New York expand its public space to make it greener and bluer, with more gardens and more sustainable parks, to even bring us closer, especially in those areas where those kinds of amenities don't exist, which is in the lower income and more marginalized, economically marginalized spaces of New York. And finally, cultural identity and place attachment. Those of you who are New Yorkers, of which I assume some of you are, know a lot about cultural identity and how public space attaches us to places, be it the Statue of Liberty and people's attachment to Liberty Island, which varies from her throwing off her shackles to identifying for immigrants who see it as Ellis Island, as my father did when he first comes to the United States, but creating this kind of symbolic and physical spatial bond with people, all the way to, this is Prospect Park here, and on one side you're seeing people together. If you can see the mass, this was during COVID, so people could be together outside. And on the other side, we have an offering. It's actually a Haitian offering for the Grand Bois tree there. This is part of religious and cultural practices near the drumming circle, for those of you who know Prospect Park. But here we have markings of cultural importance and representation and identity. But it also, cultural identity and place attachment, public spaces are also places of community cohesion. And what this is about, and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Battery Park City, but after 9/11, Lower Manhattan was, people were really traumatized and life was really very different. And it was the public spaces where everyone went. And in fact, many of you could give us other stories of post-disaster, post-trauma situation. Public spaces are where people came together, where they reformed their community, where they recreated, again, a public culture among themselves, so that healthy coming back and being part of it. And these community spaces, I think, may be the most important job that we have as designers. We certainly have a job in doing ecological planning and design and sustainable parks. We certainly have a job in terms of fostering places for community cohesion. We certainly have a job for thinking about health and well-being, or even working spaces. All of these forms, outcomes that let's see, contribute to the flourishing of our cities and our neighborhoods and our own selves, our own individual selves. These are things that we can plan and design together. And this is an example of an intercultural space that was designed in Melbourne. Actually, this is an example of a building that didn't work so well, doesn't read so well, that there has been a lot of interest now in what is called intercultural encounter, and trying to design places where people from different cultural groups can come together. We could talk about this. There's been a lot of new public space designs that attempt to do it. Sometimes it's too heavy-handed. This is not read as the kind of representations it was meant to be, but it's an interesting discussion of, can we design places that will foster intercultural contact, not just cultural identity, place attachment, but encourage intercultural contact. And I think we can, but I think we have to be careful that it can't be too heavy-handed, and imagine that we're talking about social relations. That's really what we're trying to generate. Okay, I believe I have about 5 more minutes, and I do want to give us some tools. So I hope that even though it was quick, I gave you some ideas of what public space does, because that, to me, is why I wrote the book. I want to convince everyone that it's important, and I want to provide data, evidence for designers and planners of the pieces of the puzzle that at least I'm able to document. The other thing, of course, that I have worked on, and I think some of you may have seen this slide before, which is what happens when we don't do this, that there are threats to public space. The loss of cultural symbols, the erasure of local history, not restoring social function, the whole lack of representation of people in public space can hurt it. People need to be represented, and represented in ways that they can see themselves. 2, privatization. We know there's privatization. The question is, can we use privatization better? Can we think about what really what works and what doesn't? Certainly, controlled access, expensive activities, over-regulation, and a financialized world geography. That means feeling like you can't enter the space because you don't have the money, a kind of moral geography of what we're worth. These things really destroy our spaces, as does a lack of social justice, as does too much policing, surveillance, bollards, barriers. These are the pieces that go against the kind of, that disrupt the contact, the public culture, and the atmosphere that I'm saying is fundamental to producing public spaces that encourage flourishing. All right, 2 other pieces of the puzzle. I do offer a social justice framework for evaluating public space. It's a little cumbersome still. I admit it. I'm hoping somebody will make it better. I know that people have used it and sort of cut it down to size. There's been research in which they've used it to try to evaluate spaces. But the idea was, when someone asked me, Setha, how do you know a space is working? For me, it works if there's diversity and social justice principles at play. So what I did is I took the idea of social justice and tried to explode it a little. I don't just mean distributive justice. That would mean enough space for everyone. But procedural justice, interactional justice, recognition of difference, that means that we use spaces in different ways, that we care and repair the space, that there are some questions that we can always ask of any public space, that a planner or designer could ask of what exists and what should be. Is the space distributed fairly? What does it look like at the site? But what about at a citywide level? Can we assure that people are included in procedures of allocation and use and of design? We all here in this group are really advocates of co-design, co-planning, the community-based work, putting together a public space. Can we improve the social relations through a co-production process? And the users and those who govern the space, can we bring that together? If it's a public-private group, can we do a better job? Can we ensure communications are truthful? Can we create a social environment of respect and dignity to all? Can we expand the norms of behavior? I think this is the biggest issue of all, to accommodate a diversity of behaviors and users. I mean, that's fundamental. I mean, that's, I think, the hardest thing to communicate. We aren't all the same, no matter where we are in the world. And we use our public space and we behave in different ways. And we each have our own norms. Can we build a public culture that overlaps and makes a frame to accommodate it? And can we promote more pro-social behavior and take care of others and repair the environment? Or I would argue, stop destroying the care relationships that might already exist. And finally, I offer in the book a toolkit for the ethnographic study of space, the TESS. It's designed for community members and students who want to uncover problems. I don't have time really to go over it. It says that PowerPoint wants access to my camera. I don't know why. So I'm going to conclude here with the toolkit and say that it is part of the book. It also is on the Public Space Research Group website, as you can see, www.thepsrg.org website, where you can go, and it's a 10-page brochure that would help you to do research in your own public space. It would allow you to ask questions, evaluate what you're seeing there, and do the same kind of research that I've been doing with my colleagues and my students for 35 years now, and into the future. For those of you who don't know, we just completed studying 22 state parks this summer, and trying to put that data together. So it doesn't stop. We're always trying to understand the public spaces we have and why we should value them and how we can make them better.
Well, thank you, Setha.
Okay.
It's a fabulous presentation. And I will tell you, just to hopefully gratify you with the level of importance that people ascribe to the topic, we have a quite wonderful audience today in terms of distribution internationally and numbers. I think it speaks well to the purpose and the importance of what we're discussing.
Right. I just hope you liked it. I do go fast, but it's just the taste, right, Lance? It's the taste of what's there.
I was about to say, for those who are joining us, some know all of this and some may not. This is an unbelievably rich, complicated, broad, profound topic. That's why I say I've certainly devoted many, many years and hours of my life looking into it, and others have, well, I keep getting new books. This is one by Harrison Fraker. You may have seen the title, Field Notes on the Neuroscience and Poetics of Sustainable Public Space. Right. So people dive deeply into this. And in fact, one of my first notices of this was from a colleague, a Turkish colleague, Ulka Kopur, who in Scandinavia in the late 80s was asked to write a paper on sustainability because nobody knew what sustainability was. And when I read that paper, the key element to me, which she identified, was sustainability takes place when there is sufficient public space and public realm for people to communicate about the critical needs of society. She didn't say that about institutions. She said it about the space that you discuss. Now, I have one question, which, amongst many that I thought would be most interesting for you to answer. I'll introduce the question by saying I have in one of my collections a slide showing the prohibitions of in a public space in Houston, Texas, that says no breastfeeding allowed, which was by far and away the most, ridiculous prohibition I'd ever heard, no breastfeeding around. But it comes to the question of propriety, the propriety of public space. Who gets to occupy it, when, at what time, in what way, and in what ways does that serve to support many of the metrics that you identify? So as a case in point, there's a small bridge in Barcelona connecting two neighborhoods that flank a rail yard. Those two neighborhoods were occupied by gangs that continually fought. If you went from one neighborhood to the other, you were in serious trouble. When Santiago Calatrava designed a bridge to connect those two neighborhoods, in the middle of the bridge, he built a plaza, not unlike the walkway over there. He built a plaza. And in that plaza, gang members from each came together because neither of them, they both knew they didn't own it. So this issue of how we deal, this is one slice, but from your perspective, if you were advising, let's say, a community that had contention over the occupancy of its space based on the propriety of different users by age, by activity, what would be a way of approaching the resolution of proprietary conflict?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. I always err. Let me go back. We did a book previously on cultural diversity, Rethinking Urban Parks, in 2003. So it's 20 years ago now. And in that piece of research, which is a different set of parks that we focused on, and that is authored with Dana Taplin and Suzanne Schelt, my colleagues at the Public Space Research Group, we came up with lessons learned for wanting to accommodate cultural diversity, which is somewhat where you're going. You're using the word propriety, but I would say diversity, indifference to difference, recognition of difference, all of those terms that have become so important to us. And we came out with some lessons of what, and one of the first things I would do is I think you need to make sure there's enough space to accommodate all the very different activities and have adjacencies that really work. At the same time, you need to represent all of those constituencies in some kind of central space. I mean, Prospect Park, I use time and time again, because there are spaces for women to breastfeed. There are women who are in PERDA who do not want to be near other people. There are Orthodox women who feel uncomfortable and sit with their children. But there are very private, sheltered places. And yet there's also this incredible, what do you call it? The walkway, the bike area, and that everyone walks, so that there's a space to mix, and there's spaces to retreat to. And I think that's the first step. Now, what do you do if you don't have a lot of space? Right.
you.
Well, but then we have to, Setha, you may want to wish to stop sharing. I thought I did stop sharing.
No, we're fine.
Okay, I have something from Nicholas Hamilton. He thinks I'm sharing, but I don't know what to do about it. Anyhow, what I was trying to say is what you do, you have space and you have time. And you have different kinds of adjacencies that you can then utilize. And the way I think about it, or have worked with communities, is doing what I call constituency analysis, in which you look and work with each and every one of the different groups for what they need and want. And then you begin to create a procedure of bringing them together and having them begin to work that out. Because there's a lot we have to work with. Design can accommodate a tremendous amount of difference in a very small space, especially if we take the time dimension into consideration. I mean, I don't know if there are others lessons learned. I don't know if that's where I would start. I would do the constituency analysis. I would create my matrix where the conflicts are, and we would, as a group, work on it.
So this is great, because this is speaks to the actual process whereby public space becomes actualized. I'm
Right.
thinking anecdotally, some years ago was in Romania, and I was taken by a colleague to a small town, just to have a visit to a small town outside Cluj-Napoca, a larger city. And I was taken to the planning department, and they were generous enough to show me the plans they were making for the reconstruction, the redesign, the repurposing of their major square. And their major square in the middle of this burg was a forest. And they said, you know, the reason it's a forest is when the communists came 40 years ago, they took away all the plazas and they planted forests so that people had no place to easily congregate. And so we're going to remove, or we're going to moderate the forest, and we're going to put in X, Y, and Z. And it was interesting, because there I was a guest. I wasn't asked as a consultant, but there I was. And I said, well, and I think this speaks to what you just said. I didn't use the same language, but I said, you know, you might want to do a little scenario planning with this space.
That's what we call it.
Yeah. And see,
Yeah.
you know, and try and identify all the communities you have in this wonderful town, and see what they might each desire, so you could equip the space to make it changeable, which is a technique used in Barcelona, where they'll often have an empty square, but it has water and power and places to plug in poles, so that you can do many things with it as opposed to only one.
Right.
So
I want to bring it back to that point, but even more. You know, we talk a lot about sustainability, and everyone seems, I mean, there's this assumption that sustainability is environmental, usually ecological. And what you're saying is, and what I'm in agreement with, is cultural and social sustainability is equally critical as any other kind of sustainability. And without accommodating everybody and finding ways of creating adjacency, then we can make a very ecologically sustainable park, but one that doesn't work socially or culturally. And I just want to say that sometimes I think when we use this, we're talking about everybody, when we use this sustainable urbanism, are we talking about just ecological, environmental, or are we also talking about sustainability in terms of the people and their livelihoods and their relationships?
You know, yesterday I went on a tour run by the Forum for Urban Design of the Stuyvesant Cove East Side Resiliency Project. I point this out because I'm like a and I'm totally devoted to seeing how New York is going to gird itself for future
Right.
storms and surges. And I've been waiting for a decade to see some action. And I will say this is the first physical action around the island of Manhattan. And it's probably due to open in about 3 weeks. And I think it will be, from your perspective, an interesting place for you to evaluate and comment on, because it is that multiplicity of both social and technical sustainability that's necessary. We all know that all of the discussions about how we're going to take care of the communities around the edge of this island are those that are subject to having their social aspects and their recreational aspects.
Well, it's already happening. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
the East River Park. I just sent in a book called Beach Politics. It's on environmental and racial sustainable, I guess you would say, environmental and racial injustice along the shoreline. And one of the chapters is on East River Park, which is on the Lower East Side, everyone of New York, where there was a consensus community plan. And then the city came in and did something completely different, very technological, and destroyed the community area. So there are things going on. There are things going on in New York. There's things going on in Rockaway post-Sandy that all really don't bode well for social and community sustainability. So I hope you're right about this one, because the two that I just wrote about are not good examples. They impose a kind of, they reinforce racial divides in which Black residents don't get anything and the white residents get the beach, or they take away 1,000 trees in a beloved park from the Lower East Side community members who fought very hard to keep it.
So sort of laddering over from that in terms of technology, I was very, very pleased to see Federation Square shown. I assume that Anna Ruba was as well.
Yeah. I don't know what, Anna, what did you think? I've heard, I read a dissertation that didn't love it at all.
That didn't love it, because
no, had a lot of problems with it.
What occurred to me, and we have people on the Zoom who are intimately involved with this, Gernot Rita, I don't know if Marcella is here, who've done a lot of writing about digital technology in general, communication technology, and open space, something which I say I have witnessed in travels around the world. There really is a modification, opportunities opening. And I don't think until I saw Federation Square, I saw anything as full-blown, moving in a direction of trying to incorporate technology as a means to augment the capacity of public space gathering. I've not, quite honestly, read an evaluation of how it operates. I was just amazed at the application, the creativity, the investment, and I guess a hope that it would bear fruit. So if there's something that can be said about the intersection of new forms of technology and the aspect of traditional public gathering and how those two are being melded. I don't know if that's...
As Anna going to say, I mean, everything I've gotten involved with, I'm involved on the planning board right now of the World Urban Forum, and they're very excited about AI and more technology. Unfortunately, the social science research that has been done so far, at least on public spaces, which is my domain, and I haven't read everything, is technology tends to reinforce the same social injustices and inequalities as existed before the technology. Technology can help us in lots of ways. I certainly think it will help with remediation, but then we need to rethink the, how can we say, the power dynamics that underlie what's being done with the technology. Does everybody understand what I'm saying?
I do, but I'd like to throw something out for you to also consider. I moderated a panel some few years ago on recreation at the offices of the Grimshaw office. And it had Adrian Benepe and Signe Nielsen. It had some of New York's greatest recreation parks experts. And everyone was complaining about digital technology and how it was going to thwart the actualization and the benefits that public space could have. And there was a fellow in the front row, and you could see he was fidgeting. And finally, his fidgeting got the better of him, and he stood up and said, "May I say something?" And I said, "Of course, it was you." And I said, "So what?" He said, "Well, I'm listening to what you're saying, but I recently came 6 months ago from Brazil to New York, and I was so lonely, and I was so missing my athletics and my ability to play soccer and things like that." And he said, "So I went online and I said, is anyone interested in creating a soccer league for those of us who recently arrived from Brazil?" He said, "In a minute, I had 60 people. We now have 5 teams. We play soccer all the time." He said, "You have to keep a little bit more of an open mind as to the benefits of digital technology and what it can do for open space and recreation." And I thought his comment was a powerful comment. So I'm looking not only for the ways in which these new technologies might be a difficulty, but also the ways in which they might be an advantage. And in your realm, since you deal with the ethnography and anthropology of that, I'm interested to know what the upside of this could be.
I don't have an answer for you. I think I right now, I actually have lost you. I completely somehow out of the Zoom. I don't exactly know what's happened, but I'm completely out of it. But there you came back.
Oh,
We had from Susan such a good question: how to augment traditional public spaces through technology, or what role can technology play? It's true, as Setha notes, that technology doesn't solve anything unless we change our thinking about public space. All right, so there's there's somebody who really understands what I'm trying to say. Technology can do a lot for us, but technology is also, having everybody on their cell phones while they're in public space, does that making contact better? Have we really gone to a level where I think we have to think about public space completely differently. It's between myself and whoever I'm talking to and the space that they're in. I began to try to think about these as translocal spaces. I do think that we're going to have to rethink, if you want to go that route, think very seriously, because it really does come down to a question that I think we all differ on, which is, what are the consequences? What are the consequences of losing face-to-face interaction? What are the consequences of social media and public spaces that are virtual versus public spaces that are material and physical? What will be the future of our public spaces from a sustainability point of view, when more and more the relationships that are formed are going to be formed online and through mobile technologies, et cetera, et cetera. I think, that's why I say I don't have an answer for you, is that I think I have to do research.
listen, I want to jump in and say that's the value of a Setha. That's a perfect answer. It's not an answer of what could be guessed at. It's an answer of, we can find these things out and we can move ahead with it. And that's why we treasure you and the work that you do. I'm very serious when I say that. Some others might offer an answer that has, little grounding, but you do the research, you do the science, so that when you present things like your siding scale, which I look at, you incorporate many of these things, and any of these questions are here, I think, only to prompt you and others to think more seriously about these issues. The cell phone thing is as difficult over dinner as it is in public space. It's another realm. I'm looking at a couple of comments. Catherine I'll refer you back to Setha's answer about propriety and scenario planning in terms of who gets to use spaces. There is so much more to unpack here today. And I think we're coming to the end of our time. And I think it's probably better for me to sincerely, profoundly thank Setha for sharing her thoughts with us. And as I said in my opening, teaching us things, to thank all who've joined us for being part of this conversation, to carry, I think, this most critical aspect of the development of our environment forward for every reason, too many to mention again. I will reiterate that we have a program on the 11th that will bring the wealth of the UIA Copenhagen meeting to the table for those who couldn't be there, to hear, curiously enough, about an urban agriculture project in Paris, where Paris, having had the promenade plantée, meaning they seem to be one step ahead of us here in New York with the High Line, we might look at that as something that will inform us. And in the future, in December, when I mentioned Kibera, if everything goes well, we'll have a guest speaker speaking from a public space in Kibera in Nigeria, giving us an example of how the other third of the world deals with these issues. So with that, I thank you. I look forward to seeing you and hearing you again. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, Lance. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It was really fun. Bye.
Bye-bye.